This is the Gauntlet Podcast's favorite games of 2017. My name is Jason.
I'm Rach.
I'm Lowell.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Rich.
Listeners, my co-hosts and I are going to be one by one revealing our favorite games of 2017 and talking a little bit about why we chose them. In between each of the host reveals, you will be hearing from different members of the Gauntlet community talk about their favorite game of 2017, as well as a few little special one-on-one recordings I did with people I'm calling Gauntlet notables. So we'll be hearing their favorite picks too. This is my favorite episode of the year. I'm very, very excited. Let's just dive right into it. Can you guys please give me a drum roll?
You can't hear it, but there's just a crash from downstairs.
No drum roll then. Okay. I'll drum roll and then I'll talk. Brrr, Rach.
Right.
What is your favorite game of 2017?
My favorite game of 2017 was Love in the Time of Siege by Jason Morningstar and Matthias Holter. It's an intense, dark fantasy game that embraces shared storytelling and tells a satisfying narrative in one sitting. As some of you might be familiar, it's based off of an existing game called Archipelago 3, and it takes that game and gives it very sharp, focused direction. I would hesitate in calling this Archipelago light, but it allows the game to showcase parts of Archipelago 3 that would get lost in a normal Archipelago game. So a lot of the player characters and the inter-character conflict. Archipelago tends to stay focused on the world building and world management, or at least in the games and campaigns I've played in. So the characters and locations feature very evocative pre-generated prompts, story hooks that help establish a very specific tone and mood at the table. It's a game of political machinations, dark magic, and bloodshed. I'm not typically the world's biggest fan of GM-less games, but the mechanics in Love in the Time of Siege really help support the players and support the table. The phrases mechanic, which allows other players who aren't starring in the scene to interrupt and ask for either more detail or perhaps shine more light on a current situation, or let themselves to get a word in edgewise, really help people get invested in each other's scenes. It gives people a reason to pay attention. You're all playing the editors of this story you're collectively telling together. So you could say, oh, I would like more detail in this player. This is awesome. Tell me more of what's going on here. Or that seems a little bit off tone. Could we maybe take a step back and re-examine how this scene could play out? There's also scene and feed guide mechanics, which allow the player sitting beside the active player to guide that active player through their part of the story. And the scene guide will help, tell you what's going on in this scene and what's awesome and what's coming for you. And the theme guide is going to look at the themes for your particular character and say, oh, this is when this important thing for your character comes up. What decision do you make now? And I know that, so Fiasco, I like to bring up Fiasco right now. It's sort of an old game that's really been talked about a lot, and it's really been discussed to death. But I feel like taking a look at Love in the Time of Siege is a lesser known alternative to a Fiasco style game. So basically a train wreck of a game that's going to explode into a conflagration, and it's really unclear what characters are going to walk away from it. If you're looking for something that goes a little bit more dark than Fiasco normally runs, I strongly recommend you take a look at this game.
Rach, we've covered Archipelago 3 a lot on this show. Years before we ever had a podcast and ever did favorite games of any year, I would have chosen Archipelago 3 as one of my favorite games on one of those years, right? What is the actual story of it? Like, does it have like a set story, like with set characters?
So the story, I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head, but you have two kingdoms, and one of which you have the king who is aging out and his rule is going to end, and he doesn't have a male heir. He has a daughter, and there's a kingdom neighboring who's got, a male lead who, hey, so conveniently his wife has died under mysterious circumstances. So this is a story about what happens when these two heads of state try to arrange a marriage in order to sort of maintain power. With all of the other, you have other characters such as you have the Sikona, who is invested in all of these people. She's sort of the power behind the throne, or a romantic interest to some of these male characters, as well as the princess, who really doesn't have an interest in being involved in these political machinations. She's also got quite a bit of magical talent that she hasn't quite revealed, as well as I believe there's also the knight who is from the other country, who has been given to the king on loan as sort of like a retainer. And you're seeing how these characters move around in a situation that everyone's got their own interests, and sort of revealing. So why did that neighboring kingdom's queen die under, and is it related to the fact that that king might have a vested interest in researching poisons? And, when is the princess's powers going to reveal? And hey, look, the knight's got something out of his character sheet about werewolves. When is that going to come up in the story?
Awesome. That sounds really great. Fantastic. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
No, unless anyone else has any questions.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Have you played it? You've played it a couple of times, right?
I've played this variant once, and then there's another version that's a little bit more fairy tale, and I believe Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian in flavor. I don't remember specifically what.
Okay.
Yes, Love in the Time of Gauntlet or something.
I can never pronounce that.
Yeah, I think, in fact, the other one, Love in the Time of, I can't say that Caverna. I think Garrett actually ran a session or two of that recently for Gauntlet Hangouts, because I just saw him put those videos up, because Bully Pulpit retweeted them. So go check out the Gauntlet YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure we have, it's not the same game, but it's the same system. So if anybody's interested in that.
Very cool.
Well, after you talked about it last time, Rach, I ran out and bought it. So at some point, I'll hope to get it to the table in 2018. Really
it's definitely it's one of those games that it tells a one-shot story, but it's very satisfying, unlike some one-shot games which either kind of stall out or leave you with a cliffhanger.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Rosella X.
And my name is Lou Quaid.
And our favourite game of 2017 is The
Fall of Magic!
So, Dungeon World and Mouse Guard were our runners-up.
Why did you choose The Fall of Magic, Rosie?
Good question, Dad. I like Fall of Magic because it's very creative and there are not many rules. You get to create your own world and it's different every time. I like how you can make up your own character and there are loads of different choices. And I like how you get to decide what the Magus is like every time as well. I usually always choose to play as Piccolo the Fox of Mistwood, though.
Yeah, you do, don't you?
Yep.
Hello, my name's Asher, and my favorite game of 2017 is Tales from the Loop by Free League. It was really no contest, because this is the year I really got into role-playing games, and this is the first game I GM'd. The Loop's quick to make characters, all of them kids. It includes both a Swedish and American setting. It tied right into Stranger Things, so it was popular in my role-playing group, but it's also not as scary, dark, or violent as other games, while not shying away from serious themes. It's also been a great introduction for my players to a more collaborative world generation, allowing them to frame scenes instead of like traditional games. The structured plot helped me as a new GM. Every session's just a different mystery, and the game asks players to tamper that mystery with scenes from quote-unquote real life. The mechanics differ from Powered by the Apocalypse games, because dice are rolled in pools. Getting a 6 means the roll was successful. This way of rolling can prove more hit or miss, but I feel like that contributes to the theme of player characters being kids. Like, kids aren't great at everything. Also, similar to PTBA, a failed roll does not mean a failure to perform an action, but it could mean a GM move against the player instead. Overall, I've really enjoyed the game, but I haven't really seen it come up on the Gauntlet. So I wanted to bring it up.
All right, I am here with game designer and layout artist Ollie Jeffrey. Ollie is one of my co-conspirators on the Codex Zine. Hi, Ollie. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Jason. How's it going?
Pretty good. All right, Ollie, tell us, what is, drumroll, what is your favorite game of 2017?
My favorite game of 2017 is obvious to the point of I don't even need to be here. It's Monster Hearts 2. because I heard everyone say how fabulous it was for years and years and years, and then I finally got to play it twice this year at Gauntlet, both of them, and it's just such an amazing game.
Yeah. So did you have much experience with the first Monster Hearts, or was Monster Hearts 2 your first entry into that?
I'd read it, but I hadn't. I'd never actually got the chance to play it. So yeah, Monster Hearts 2 was it was my first proper entry into it, and just the way it's constructed, the way it makes you look really good as an MC because it sort of just plays itself. Like the characters just roll their own fun. Like one thing leads to another, and you're there just trying to keep up.
Yeah. I was going to ask you I was initially going to ask you how does it compare to Monster Hearts 1? But no, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it does do that, right? Like it doesn't require, I think you still have to think about a lot of things as the MC, but in many ways, yeah, you're right. The moves do a lot of work.
Sure. Yeah. But just the actual, in terms of how it compares to Monster Hearts 1, the text of the book is beautiful as well. Like little tiny changes that she made, like calling NPCs side characters, because it's not just like a little bit of jargon busting, but it tells you what they need to do. NPC doesn't tell you what to do with them. Side characters lets the MC know that they're not meant to have the main control of the story. Calling the PCs main characters lets you know where the focus is. It's a lovely bit of writing.
MC reactions versus moves, I thought was an interesting one.
Yeah. Because again, it's so much more inviting to someone who hasn't come to role-playing before. And I think the genre helps that as well, because the sort of the teen supernatural romance is, it's a very different beast to goblins and dragons and shit.
Right. So do you have a favorite skin?
My favorite skin is probably the Mortal, which is a bit of a weird one, because it's, you've got a game full of werewolves and vampires and stuff. But I think the way that the Mortal reflects that particular, I think I heard it referred to as trash sub in someone's review of Monster Hearts, but that's sort of the person who is no one, or who thinks that they are no one apart from who they are dating. It's beautifully done.
It's very good. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and letting me know your favorite game. And thanks so much for all your help this year on Codex.
Oh, no, it's been a pleasure. I love Codex. And thanks for having me on.
My name is Dylan Ross, and my favorite game of 2017 is Blades in the Dark. I haven't played it yet or run it, but I've read it and I've been talking about it, and I'm super excited about it, mostly because I love the setting. I love the city of Duskfall, the darkness, the ghost elements and supernatural stuff. But I really love the idea of playing scoundrels and doing heists and jobs and having a crew and interacting with other crews and turf wars, and everything about this game just speaks to me. So I'm very excited to play Blades in the Dark eventually. But that's my favorite game of 2017, just based on how excited I am.
My name is Lloyd, and I'd like to say that Tales of the Loop by Free League is the best game of 2017. Everyone is all about that Stranger Things vibe with the whole kids going out, Goonies, Stand By Me, but no game really brings out the fun part of that element than actually Tales of the Loop itself. The game takes kids, puts them into funky situations, has a fantastic way of building mystery and story given to the GM, and when you are having massively fun adventures, it also advises you to stop, take a break, and go be kids again. Go see your friends, go hang out with your mates, go see your dog, go climb a tree, go to your hideout. It has this lovely little in-play and out-play break that I have not seen work so well than it has for Mouse Guard. And it was really cool to play a game where I didn't just have to be constantly over and over and over again trying to win. I could just stop, take a breather, relax, recover my injuries and everything else, and then get back onto the case again. Highly recommend if you get a chance to play it, you 100% play it. Lord Francis ran, I believe, earlier. Hell, I'll run it if you need to. Just call me. Yeah.
All right, we are back. Shall we have another go at the drum roll? I feel like that's just going to pick up nasty noise on the mic.
I know.
I'm so sorry for the editors.
Any award-winning blogger.
Oh,
lol.
don't do that.
Yes!
It's real. I saw it.
What is your favorite game of 2017, sir?
So my favorite game of 2017 is actually Mutant Year Zero by Free League Publishing. And it's a post-apocalyptic game that has really two sides to it. On the one hand, it has very much this we're building a community, we're building a space, we're developing our camp, our arc, and then there's a hex crawl. So you've got this weird combination, and it's either a Tridindle or a trendy game, however you want to say that.
I haven't heard trendy yet. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's actually what.
Yeah, but then it's only good if you write it down, though.
Oh, that's true. Yes, it doesn't sound right. Yeah, it doesn't sound as good as it looks.
Fair enough. But that was given to us by Quinn's from Sit Up, Shut Down, or whatever however you say that. I just did that terrible. Oh my God.
Shut up and sit down.
Anyway. So this is a big hardcover RPG. Looks like very traditional, big book. It's a game that has detail tracking for encumbrance and resources and things. It comes from a lot of older games. It's the latest iteration of this particular game. It has skill lists, and it has, of course, the hex crawl materials. But then it's got all of these, what I'm going to call indie developments. XP is in part based on your relationships, on your buddies, on the people you're protecting, the people you're interacting with. It has relationship questions and playbook style questions in those character archetypes. It has social interactions given a lot of weight. Some of the characters are just about being social characters. They have a lot of power behind them in that. The game follows that something always happens principle. They say, no role should ever do nothing. There should always be something that happens. The role should be meaningful. I mean, that's I think striking to see in a game that looks very trad. And the game specifically says you're not supposed to prepare. The GM is not supposed to prepare at all. It's very, very explicitly anti-prep. Instead of prep, what they say is at the start of the session, the GM either draws a card from a deck or rolls on a table and generates a threat. And a threat might be like a murder happens in the camp, or it might be that some raiders attack, or it might be you see a flare out in the zone. It could be from all different kinds of directions. And then you're supposed to play it out. The game has a lot of random tables, like for generating characters, inside the camp, and it has all of this random hex crawl material. It has some set places that you could drop in, but generally when they go and explore, it's got all these little color detail elements and foes and things like that. And that's really striking because it very much is in that play to find out what happens. I don't know going into a session of it what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be seeing. That threat starts out, and it feels very indie, and then we hit like the dice mechanics, and I'm like, wait, okay, this isn't that. Particularly what I love about it and what the players loved about it is it has your arc, which is your camp. You do these projects, something I've talked about before when I've talked about Mutant Year Zero, where everybody contributes to work on a project, but they all have to decide what they're going to do. We're going to build a pigsty, or we're going to build a distillery, or we're going to, build a museum. And they decide what they're going to do, and it requires different skills, and people then mark it on the map, and you make roles for it. And that decision that you do that is very much this group talk at the beginning about what they want the community to be. And it really centers the start of each session. And I really love that. And I ran it as a face-to-face campaign for about 18 sessions. It ran through the first half of 2017. And then I also ran it a few sessions online. I thought it was going to be just kind of Gamma Worldy when I first looked at it, but it's a game with a lot of humanity to it. And the system does help support that. At the same time, it is a super dangerous game. You can really get badly injured. The dice are very fickle. If you can always push your luck, but push your luck has some serious risks to it. And somehow that works, even in the context of people trying to kind of be a community and survive. There's also a meta story to it that in the 18 sessions we explored, and it's really neat. There's a sort of an answer to why you are in this world and why you are how you are in it, that I don't want to go into too much, but you could take it or leave it, but it has some really fun elements to it. And I will say I had 6 players at the table for it, and I never felt like that was too many. Everybody got to do stuff. The system didn't get in the way. It didn't bog down. We were able to go through resolution fairly quickly, and I didn't have to have so many rolls. So it worked. Another thing last thing I want to say about this is it's a really good translation. It's really solid. Free League also did Tales from the Loop, and that came out. It's a neat game. It's that 1980s game. That translation is not as good. There are artifacts in there. There are phrasings, things like that don't quite hold up. And like some of the French translations I've read have the same problem. I have to say the Mutant Year Zero translation from the Swedish to English is spot on. It's clean. It's clear. It feels like native English writing. It holds up.
Awesome. I feel like one of the big storylines of this year is that blurring the lines between traditional games and more indie, flavored games. I want to say it was, what's that big UK convention that just happened? Dragon Meat, yeah. I was listening to one of the little roundtable things on that, and they captured some audio of, and or maybe it was a recap I was reading. In any case, they were talking. That was one of the things that came up. It was like that line is getting blurred, right? Like between what used to be just a story game, or what was an indie game, or what was a trad game. Like all that stuff is starting to blur a little bit. You see that with. I think the rise in popularity of 5e is a big part of that. I think, you can see it with games like Mutant Year Zero, like Tales from the Loop. On a much smaller scale, Fear of a Black Dragon, our podcast, that's its whole thing, right? Is like blurring that line. I love that storyline in RPGs right now. I think that's really great.
I'll tell you another really interesting example of this is Modifius, which has done their very crunchy 2D20 system, which you played in the version we did with the Conan game.
Right.
Star Trek Adventures. It's heavily influenced by Fate.
Yeah.
It strips that game down from its earlier versions, and it has a lot of Fate throughout it. And it was really striking to see that they've simplified and gone that direction.
One thing Jason, I was right along there with you, the whole blending the lines between the more story gamey, looser elements and some of the hex crawly OSR and more traditional games as well. One of the things that has helped it for me in playing Mutant Year Zero and Star Trek Adventures is Roll20. Having those automated die rolls for those little fiddly die mechanics of like, okay, you can re-roll this die and not this die, that kind of stuff. Having it automated in Roll20 does a great job of helping those cruncher mechanics kind of fall away. And then there's support with relationship and more meta commentary that we see in story games that we're more used to. So I've really enjoyed those type of games this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. I've noticed that too. I want to say even in that Conan game we played, as crunchy as it was, lol, I remember like the Roll20 stuff like eased that pain.
Yes.
Right? Like there was a definite like easing of the friction, right?
Oh yeah.
Anybody else have any more questions for Lowell about Mutant Year Zero? Lowell, anything else you want to say about it?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. I think that's a great pick for favorite game.
Hi, my name is Sherry Stewart. I've been playing with the Gauntlet for all of 2017, and it has been an embarrassment of riches between home campaigns and Gauntlet episodes. Probably played between 3 and 4 games a week. Lots of good campaign games. I have to call out Blades in the Dark. I have to call out Dresden Files Accelerated and Velvet Glove. But my absolute favorite was actually a hack of Fate. It wasn't even a beta testing. It was an alpha testing. And for some reason, I'm still thinking about it 6-7 months later, or however long ago it was, 3-4. And it was called Reign of Crows. It was an attempt to run a Game of Thrones type game. It was very thinky and very puzzly, and the players were smashing. The GM really brought the obstacles and the difficulty, and It did something that a lot of other games hadn't, and I'm still thinking about it. So for me, that's my 2017 Game of the Year.
My name is Sydney, and my favourite game of 2017 is Liberté. Liberté is a French-language PBTA game by Vivian Faison, which I had the absolute pleasure of playing with him during Gauntlet Con. It does these three things really different that interest me. Firstly, it uses a character's emotional investment rather than their stats to power their roles. So you take a resource called Black Bile when something in the fiction upsets your character, and then you spend Black Bile to add bonuses to your rolls. And this is the second thing, the success with complications don't exist in that 7 to 9 middle results range. They're actually the really high ones, the 11 plus. So you spend your emotional fuel to avoid failures, but then if you roll high, you go too far and you take harm, or you break something important, or you hurt someone else, or you sacrifice very precious resources. So it's this game about driving your character into getting emotionally hurt by other characters and then accidentally hurting them back when you try to make everything better. It makes this really explosive, out of control game that is still so intimate and has so much heart. The third thing that I love about Liberté is that every character is a 9-year-old orphan that's trying to survive in a post-apocalypse beset by demon beasts that grow out of puddles in a world of eternal rain. I'm sorry, Boots. That could never end well.
I am here with David Lafreniere, my co-host on the Discern Realities podcast and my co-editor on the Codex Zine. David, welcome back to the Gauntlet podcast.
Thanks for having me back on. It's always great to be on the Gauntlet podcast.
All right, David, I'm giving you a drum roll. What is your favorite game of 2017?
My favorite game of 2017 is 10 Candles.
Great choice. So why'd you pick 10 Candles?
I had a really hard time deciding this year on what was going to be my favorite game. And so I narrowed it down to 3 choices. And what was kind of unique about these 3 choices is that I played all of them in the context of a convention, either a physical convention or Gauntlet Con online convention. But I decided on 10 Candles because I think the other 2 games I had selected were great because of the players and the play that was happening at the table, and not necessarily like as rules driven as 10 Candles was. 10 Candles, the system was really singing to me, and it was a game I've been excited about playing for years before I got to play it. So it really paid off. Sometimes that doesn't happen, sometimes you build something up in your mind and it doesn't quite deliver, but 10 Candles totally did.
Well, and yeah, that's the thing. Like, you had like a certain expectation because before you played 10 Candles, you played with us in the Gauntlet and Face to Face Houston playing Society of Dreamers by Candlelight, right?
Right.
And that's a really like fine, enjoyable experience, right? It's like a premier sort of role playing game experience that we used to do back in Houston. And so, yeah, I had a similar thing with 10 Candles. I got to play it this year too, but I got to play it with Steven, in fact, the designer, but it was a slightly different, it wasn't the normal sort of 10 Candles frame, and I'll just leave it at that, and Steven knows what I'm chuckling about, so no shade here.
Yeah, I heard about that, where you were trying out something a little different.
In any case, yeah, no, like, I had that same thing, like, oh man, like, I already play games by Candlelight. Like, I hope this will stack up. The game is really good.
Yeah, it was a fantastic session. It was very, very dark. We had the X card in play, but we really kind of had a conversation about the game beforehand, about, where we were willing to go, and maybe are we willing to push boundaries a little bit further, because that's kind of the idea behind the game. And so everyone was really on board with that, and it led to some very, very dark storytelling, which isn't something that you get a lot of opportunity to do. You don't always want to do that. You don't want to do that probably many times a year, but when you do, and everyone at the table is willing to do that and wanting to do that, you can get a pretty terrific story. So that's my pick for 2017, 10 Candles.
Yeah, that's terrific. One thing that sticks out to me too, when you mentioned that you played that at a convention, I think something that speaks to the effectiveness of 10 Candles is the fact that you were able to get that excellent story out of the system, despite the fact that you didn't know any of the other players, right? Like you were it was like a mostly unknown group to you, right? Like you didn't know any of those people.
I didn't know any of them. Yeah, I'd never played in a game with them before.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that you were able to go to those really like dark, uncomfortable places and you felt supported by the system in that. I think that speaks really well to the game. So
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, David.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for your help this year on both DR and Codex.
Absolutely.
My name is Tomer Gurantz, also Tome. 2017 is Tension by Alex Roberts. I got to play it at Big Bad Con, and it was deliciously full of feels. I almost cried at the end. It's a 2-player game about forbidden love, where you use a Jenga tower to see how far the relationship goes. Hence its other working title, Love Dread. Well, that's what some of us call it.
Hello, my name is Justin, aka Dissonance, at Mothlands on Twitter, etc. And my favorite game of 2017 is Downfall by Carolyn Hobbs. This is an indie story game for 3 players. In this game, you create a haven, which is characterized by a fatal flaw that will eventually lead to its destruction or downfall. It's a tragic game, one in which you take turns playing a cast of 3 characters, each with their own agenda. An individual player will, by the end of the game, have played each of them. And that really helps create ownership of the world and the story, and allows you to take that story into really intense places. This is a really powerful tool for speculative fiction stories, and many of my favorite stories that I've ever told in the story gaming space have been told through this game. We've told stories in which people had their reproductive rights taken away from them by a computer algorithm. We've told a story of a society corrupted by the flaw of generosity, in which people attended estate sales for the living, and of a society ruled by librarians who conducted secret rites to cremate the dead because their bodies were filling the bottom reaches of the great library. It's a tragic and beautiful game.
All right, we are back. Fantastic blogger and community organizer, Kate. I feel bad because I didn't give Rach a little special intro. Maybe I'll go and add it in later. Fantastic blogger and community organizer, Kate Bullock. What have you chosen as your favorite game of 2017?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of cheating because I was one of the judges for the IGDN Awards, and the game that won Game of the Year, because I was like, this game should win Game of the Year, is my Game of the Year.
That's not cheating. You just still love it. That's fine.
Right. It's consistency, I feel. So Pelgrane Press brought out a wonderful selection of games that they put into a book called 7 Wonders. And it's by a variety of authors, all from the UK and all women designers. And my favorite in that book is Before the Storm by Joanna Piancastelli. It's a fantasy game. I don't really generally gear towards fantasy games, but it's a fantasy game where you play a group of people who have gone out on an adventure before, and you've gotten this sword of destiny. You've come back, and it's the night before an epic battle where you're almost likely to all die. And instead of sitting down to this meal and being like, hey, we should all reminisce about all the best times in our life, we're like, no, this thing I hate about you, we're going to have it out today. So it's a story game. There is a very light card mechanic that kind of lets you figure out if you're going to die in the final battle or if you manage to survive. And you can help each other out. And it uses this card mechanic in a way that really is narratively impactful, because if you give a card to another person to help them survive, you then get to narrate what you're doing in the fiction to help them survive in the final battle scene. But really that final battle is the smallest part of the entire game. It's probably one of the role-playing games this year that every time I've played it has been absolutely evocative. It has stabbed me right in the heart, and we all know I love to be sad. And despite every time I've played like a really likable character, and I've played a really awful horrible character. I've really tried to like play out the system in the variety of roles it offers. Everyone always chooses me to survive. So I've never actually died in the final battle, so it might color my feeling about the game.
So you like it because you always win? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know,
it's why I like Balderdash.
Yeah, kind of.
Because no one can beat me at it.
Yeah, no, it's one of those games where every time I've walked away from it, I've loved the character I've played. I've wanted to know more about that world. I've wanted to know more about the story. And it's never been the same twice, despite being the exact same setting each time. Like, it's always the Stormsworn that are coming after you. You're always all about to die. You've always gone to get this specific sword. And despite that, it's like, oh my God, such different stories have come out every time. It's beautiful, it's stunning, and it's simple. And it's also becoming a mass LARP. Because we need more LARP in our lives.
Yeah, that's cool. I was actually thinking that when you were describing it. I was like, oh, that sounds like a great LARP setup.
Yeah, we've always played it while we're eating. Because so it always feels like you're kind of LARPing. It's a little blurry in that regard, but it has definitely been my like thing I've looked forward to every time I've played the most this year.
There was one time we had a foam sword.
We did have a fake sword one time.
That's how you know you're officially LARPing, right?
It was used.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about it, or does anybody else have any questions?
I just want to, sir, I've run it here for our home group, and then I ran it at Gen Con in 2016, and I had a pretty clearly OSR player who who was very much about that, and he had his Lamentations books on the table in front of him, and it was interesting to watch that player resist for a very long time, kind of playing along and being with the mechanics, but eventually that kind of winning him over and realizing that he could be the uber character he wanted to be, because it would still work within the system. So it was neat to see it have that effect.
Yeah, honestly, Lamentations, one of the things I love about Lamentations as an OSR system thematically is it really like leans into this sort of like despair, right? And this sort of like anguish of like being a fantasy character, right? So I'm surprised it didn't gel to it quicker even.
Mm.
Well, I think when we played it back in May at the Cottage Retreat, we had a mix of traditional players and a couple of story gamers, and everyone had their specific niche they wanted to, build their character into, and they all gelled together, even though they came from very different playing backgrounds.
Well, it is a game that heavily embraces the power fantasy, almost in the way I find Apocalypse World games do, where like you are the coolest vampire ever, right? Or you are the most badass gun lugger on this desert.
You are the gun lugger, in fact. Yeah.
Right? You get to be really, really cool in this game because there's no mechanics to support your coolness, right? You are just however badass you want to be. And I love games that let you do that. Fall of Magic, similar, where it's just like, you can be the hero of Barleytown, and I don't know what that means, but whatever. You are so cool. There's nothing to stop you because it doesn't matter. But we're not going to tell you that.
We trick them.
Yeah, right. You trick them into thinking they're cool, and then you're like, cool. But yeah, what's your playing card say? Because it's the only mechanic that matters.
How many reds and how many blacks?
Right. And I love games that do that. They're kind of like, yeah, you're badass. Who cares?
Can I ask one question of you, Kate?
Sure.
Have you had a chance to run any of the other ones? This is literally, I love the whole book, but this is the only one I've actually been able to get to the table.
I did get a chance to run When the Dark is Gone, which is a game where the facilitator is a therapist and everybody else are adult versions of the kids who went to a magical world when they were little and then came back and no one believed them. And now they're all mentally ill or have addictions or have other issues, and they're trying to sort that shit out at the table. And it's lots of disclaimers on it's not a real therapy session. It's not a real therapy session. I think it's by Becky Annison.
Yeah,
and I facilitated it once, and it is a charged game. It is very free form story game. There's really no mechanics. I really, really enjoyed it. I would love to be on the player side because as a therapist, you just sit there and you're like, so when Paul betrayed you, how did that make you feel, Allison? Like you asked really horrible questions of them, but in your therapist voice. I really, really dug it. I haven't had a chance to play it, but there's just everything in there is a game I want to dig into. The only two I've had a chance to play, though, are those two this year.
Okay. Awesome. All right, let's go hear more community members.
Kia ora, I'm Lauren, and my game of 2017 is The Veil. There are several reasons why I love The Veil so much. Firstly, the system invites you to challenge and explore sociocultural norms about how we as humans engage in society, which it does pretty seamlessly. Each playbook holds unique personal hooks that really let you dig into those big political questions about like capitalism, rights to privacy, consent, and what it means to be human. And like one of my favorite playbooks for this is The Apparatus, who starts out as this AI, exploring the world, find their place in it. So mechanically, you start out with one emotion and then unlock other emotional states through play, like happy and sad and peaceful and angry. And I love this so much since it really invites you to engage with what it means to be human at both this very personal and political level. And to that note, the second thing I love is its use of emotion instead of stats for rolling moves. Since rolling with how you feel really makes you focused on what your character is experiencing in this moment. And again, The Apparatus is like my favorite playbook in particular for rolling with emotions, since you set it with one, right? So you get to navigate this very emotionally flat character that then slowly blossoms into this rich, multifaceted AI. And I like the most bleedy game of this recently, where I started out as this creepy, peaceful AI who experienced fear for the first time and then proceeded to break down over the course of like an hour, so they couldn't control this like deviant emotional state. And the third thing I love about it, to that note, is like there is so much bleed. Like every time I play this game, I just come away so personally affected by the narrative. Like the system and setting are so like thought-provoking and personal, and it's a very satisfying experience. Like, oh, guys, it is so good. If you have not played it, play it. If you have played it, I guess play it some more. So it's like, The Veil is not just my game of 2017, but like probably forever. So I just like, can't say enough good things about it. Like, again, if you just like go and play it, it's amazing. And I could say like so many good things about it, but I'll stop here. So just it's so good. It's so good.
My name is Gerrit, and this is
Milan.
And our game of the year is
Tiefer Wald,
also known as Deep Forest by Avery Elder and Mark Diaz Truman. And this is a game we have played like 6-7 times, I think. It's my son Milan is 5 years old, and we have a time off in Guatemala, and we played in the Pacific Beach. We built our monster community. We played it with a very big piece of paper and drawing all day long and answering difficult questions about communities and who has to leave and who can stay. What do we find in abandoned places left over by our human colonists? We love that game, and we are sure to play it over and over again.
I am here with game designer Fraser Simons. Fraser is also my co-conspirator, or really the lead conspirator on the Pocket Size Play podcast. Fraser, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. So Fraser, tell us, what is your favorite game of 2017?
Well, I hate to be predictable, but it's Monster Hearts 2. After Mercy Falls, I was thinking about it, and I just couldn't picture another game being my absolute favorite. Like, we had some great times with We Hunt the Keepers, but Mercy Falls was really great because I've played with so many different people from the Gauntlet with it across all the different like series of them, right? Like in 83, and then the first series, and then the third series.
Yeah. So just so listeners are aware or have better context, I ran a series of, or really a great big whole campaign this year of Monster Hearts 2 called Mercy Falls. And yeah, like there was like a sort of mainline Mercy Falls story, and then there was this sort of throwback Mercy Falls 83 story. And yeah, you got to be in both of those. Those were really great. I mean, Monster Hearts 2 is a really, really good game.
Yeah, people were killing it too. And we got to play with like, I don't know, probably 6 different people that I hadn't played with for it, I think. Something like that.
I think in total, the whole Mercy Falls saga, I want to say was like probably like 10 players in total. Yeah. So yeah, pretty good group. Awesome. Well, like mechanically, as far as like Monster Hearts 2 goes, I know that you were a fan of Monster Hearts, the first one, Monster Hearts 1. What is it about Monster Hearts 2, I guess, that like really, sticks out for you as far as the rules go?
I thought the clarifications were great. When you read it, I got a much clearer sense of how the fiction was supposed to go. And even though I picked what I found out to be very difficult of a playbook, the Fae, which I think I only was like a mediocre player in terms of like asserting the moves and driving the fiction, it still turned out to be a great story. And I really like that it, like, by removing the choice that you are turned on by someone or not, the the resulting fiction is just so interesting with such a simple thing of just saying you don't have control over this.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, the Fae is tricky.
Yeah.
It remains tricky in Monster Hearts 2, in my opinion. I think that skin, probably more than any of the other skins, wants you to be doing like a really particular thing proactively, which is like, you know, the whole like making contracts and stuff and kind of leaning on people when they break them. It's a very particular style of play. But even though that part of the Fae playbook didn't really like come out so much in our game, I think that we still got to see like the quote unquote like Fae-ness of your character, right? Like that was not any kind of inhibition. Like we got the full like kind of Fae experience still, which I thought was great.
Yeah. I think the moves, I'm not the player to be doing those types of moves, but yeah, like there's still the injection of Fae into Mercy Falls setting and the dynamics between the players were still all there and still great.
Awesome. Well, Fraser, thanks so much for coming on and letting us know your favorite game of 2017.
Thank you.
And thanks for all your help this year on Pocket Size Play, too.
No problem.
My name is Kyle Thompson, and my favorite game of 2017 is The Veil. Two things stand out about this game for me. First, the emotional state system, which is great not only because it fits the game well, but also because it's very modular, and I see it being applied to many games in the future as a significant design innovation. Second, the playbooks, which have a depth I haven't seen in many other games, and which really help to bring the themes of Cyberpunk to life. All of them make me want to run a long campaign to see how the stories they tell unfold. I have to give an honorable mention to SIG Manual of the Primes for its wonderful scene framing and belief system, and I see myself running a lot of both SIG and The Veil in 2018.
Hi, this is Kevin Lovecraft, and my favorite game of 2017 has been Monster Hearts 2 by Avery Alder and published by Buried Without Ceremony. The game has provided me with some of the best collaborative play, and I've learned so much about how to be a better player and how to be a better MC/GM. I've loved every minute of being in Mercy Falls, and it also gave me the opportunity to run the game myself as a one-shot a few times at GameholeCon, and I've actually started my own online campaign as well. Love this game so much. It just gives me so much pleasure to play in such a collaborative and creative way with other people.
Okay, we are back. Hero of the online role-playing game space, organizer of Gauntlet Con. Rich Rogers, what have you chosen for your favorite game of 2017?
One of my favorite non-RPG podcasts is called iFanboy, and it's a comic book review show. Every week the episodes come out, and one of the hosts will pick their comic of the week, their pick of the week podcast. And Ron Richards, who now actually works for Marvel, is this dyed-in-the-wool X-Men fanboy. So every week that he's got the pick and an X-Men book comes out, you can pretty much bet that's going to be his pick of the week. So bearing that in mind, my game of the year is Apocalypse World 2nd Edition.
Kill Surprise.
You know, I know, exactly. It's like you know, I thought, I actually gave it thought. I was tempted to go with 7th Sea 2nd Edition. It is a very close runner-up. I've had a lot of fun with that game. But as I look over my play in 2017, I ran Junk World for the Intercontinental Group of Awesome. I ran the Hong Kong version of Apocalypse for the Gauntlet early in the year. I ran a lot of Apocalypse World via play-by-post. And it's so good. In 2nd edition, you know, this is the grandparent. I can't call it the granddaddy, right? Because it's by Megan Vincent. So the grandparent of Apocalypse Engine. It's a cleaner version. They added some new cool stuff like battle moves and cat and mouse and single combat. They cleaned up the HX process. They've added lifestyle, which is a pretty cool way to add a pressure valve to enforce scarcity, whereas before it was just hey, let's say that you're scarce, you know, that you don't have this one thing, and now you've got lifestyle that can kind of push gigs, and it it primes the pump, right? It gets the engine going and pushes things along. It makes you get out of your workshop, or it makes you, the Maestro D, get out of their restaurant to go do stuff and get out in the apocalyptic world. The thing about Apocalypse World, first and second edition, that I love so much is that, and I see it more and more Apocalypse Engine games are becoming much more like, you do this thing with this game, right? The Sprawl, you are going to run missions. Mashed, you will cut motherfuckers up and they will die on the table, right? Velvet Glove, you are a gang of girls in the 70s. They're very specific and they're finely tuned. And that's great. Like, I enjoy the heck out of those games. But Apocalypse World is just this dirty chassis, right? And you can bolt on all kinds of cool stuff. Like, honestly, cat and mouse, single combat, the battle moves, you don't have to use those. It is built to do an apocalypse, and that apocalypse is completely up to whatever the table wants. I've seen swamp apocalypses, snow apocalypses. I've seen Junk World was on an alien planet. I mean, you really, anytime that you want to have some scarcity and a lot of guns for no particular reason, just to shoot them, and things that run on some kind of fuel, do Apocalypse World. It's great for action. It's great for drama. It doesn't stay too long, right? It's built for a mini series of games. You can tell amazing stories with it, and I definitely have. I love Apocalypse World. Like, as I think about all the games that I enjoy, the one that I can always come back and it always feels fresh and new is Apocalypse World. There are times where I get a little burned out, and I played a lot of Apocalypse Engine games this year to do the Ladder and the Sandy. And I got a little burnout on a few of them. Like, I'm kind of done with Spirit of 77 for a little while. Because there's only one general kind of story you can tell. But I've played Apocalypse World games that were intimate and personal. I've played games that were tight and confined and felt claustrophobic. I've played wide open Apocalypse World games where people were ranging from place to place, and the playbooks change that mix every single time, and that's what's so exciting about it. And then the thing, I'm on my horse here, but another thing I love about Apocalypse World is the advanced fuckery and the idea of, hey, here's the game, here's how you make custom moves, right? Here's how you make the world your own. And after kind of some of the first generation Apocalypse Engine games, I've just seen that fall away. And I miss it. Like, I really love the idea that in Apocalypse World, there's like a whole chapter where you go, okay, you've got this kind of setup. Here's a possible custom move that you could create. Here's a way that you could make this environment even more dangerous by putting mechanics to it. And I just think that's really powerful, because that aspect makes us all feel like game designers at the table, right?
Yeah, 100% true. I mean, that whole idea of advanced fuckery of custom moves and doing all this stuff. I mean, look at what the Dungeon World community has done with that advice, right?
100%. Yeah. And I don't understand why Dungeon World gets all that, but like very, very little Apocalypse
D&D,
World
that's
stuff.
why.
Fair, but there's still, like, I see a lot of apocalypse-oriented stuff like Mutant Year Zero, and I've never understood why there isn't more, like, here's a frame for Apocalypse World that you could jump into. Because they're great. Dungeon World starters are amazing. And I really feel like we could have some Apocalypse starters.
Interesting.
Or Enders, I guess you might call it.
I ran 10 sessions of 2E this year myself, and I don't even consider myself very good at post-apocalyptic stuff. It's not something I'm super up on as far as like the various genre touchstones. But it doesn't even matter. We had a great time with those sessions because the moves do so much work. I mean, the moves do a huge amount of work. They get you to good story. I think that 2E is interesting because it actually adds so much to the game. But like you said, it's totally modular, and we just grabbed the pieces that we needed when we needed them, and it worked really great.
Yeah. And the HX process is so much cleaner now. Before, there was a little bit of like, okay, let me look at your playbook. Now look at my playbook. Okay, you get a little bit of this, you get a little bit of that. Now it's all single player facing. You can look at your character sheet and you know what to do, and you can walk through it. It sped up that kickoff process dramatically for my games. Yeah,
the text is better too. I mean, the first Apocalypse World text was interesting and very like, and also, yeah, it was very opaque and it's interesting and opaque. I think it was a great, like, here's the flavor I'm going for sort of text. It was not a great text, in my opinion, for like actually teaching the game. Right. And I think that, I know people will disagree with me on that, but whatever. I think though that the second edition text is so clear. It's like a really beautifully written text. I read the whole thing front to cover in preparation for my sessions, and I was very, very impressed by it.
I hear you about Apocalypse. Like, the first time I read it, I was a little confused too, but now I think about, like, people will pick apart this analogy and that's fine. I think that kind of like, if I were to go back after reading a lot of horror, I'll go back and read H.P. Lovecraft. Like, wow, this guy was kind of hackneyed. Like, who had ever expressed how to play like we play now with Apocalypse Engine before? Like, how would you even know how do you describe the color blue to a blind man? Like, that's the way I felt now that I've played this game and I kind of get it. Coming back to some of my friends that I played with in college and trying to help them understand a pick list and help them understand the visceral feeling of playing a really well-run Apocalypse Engine game. It's tough. It's tough. But I agree. The Apocalypse World 2nd Edition is way easier to pick up and read. But I also wonder if that's because I've been playing this for a number of years.
I think obviously I think they benefit from 5+ years or 6+ years of community feedback, right? And like watching the game and the engine grow. And, you look at Urban Shadows, which I consider to be like this sort of like pinnacle PBTA text, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It benefits hugely, right? From PBTA having been out in the world, right? And kind of seeing like best practices and things. So awesome. Any other questions for Rich about AW2E? Does anybody need to have it explained to them what it is?
So what is Apocalypse World here, Rich?
What is Apocalypse World 2?
So what is this apocalypse and why is there a world? Oh,
shouldn't there not be a world anymore? I mean, it was an apocalypse. Hello. Awesome. All right, let's dive back into community stuff.
My name is Maria Rivera, and my favorite game of 2017 is Godbound. I ran this game for a bunch of all-star, superstar people on GauntletCon, and it was a good time, and that's why it is my pick for this year.
Hi, this is Horst. My favorite game of 2017 is Freebooters on the Frontier, a dungeon world hack by Jason Lutz. While Dungeon World is about unique and super competent heroes, often in a high fantasy setting, Freebooters is about fragile characters trying to survive the harsh conditions on the frontier of civilization. With just the 4 basic classes from Moldvay D&D, completely randomized character creation that could leave you with 2 hit points, and encumbrance rules where the characters might have to literally drag their loot back to safety, Freebooters recaptures the survival horror roots of BX instead of the power fantasy of more recent D&D versions. Like in the Keep of the Borderlands, characters are hurled into strange lands beyond civilization, and as such, Freebooters' fictional basis is Blood Meridian and the Revenant, rather than the Lord of the Rings or King Arthur. On top of that, Freebooters has a magic system that truly feels magical. Spells are created randomly by combining spell elements, which are then shaped and warped depending on the number of power points available to the caster. A second edition of Freebooters on the Frontier is due in 2018, and I would be delighted to run a couple of sessions for Gauntlet Hangouts next year.
All right, I am here with game designer and game translator Tom McGrenery. He is also my illustrious co-host on Fear of a Black Dragon. Tom, how's it going?
Pretty good. Nice to see you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Tom,
yes.
Please tell our listeners your favorite game of 2017.
There's only one contender really here for me. It's been I ran a weekly campaign that lasted about half the year of Yoon Suin by David McGrogan, which, before you say it, yes, is not technically a game, but despite not having a core mechanic inside its many pages, it's been the driving force for everything that happened in that game, and I think it really deserves to take the credit. It's like really evocative and useful game text, as we've discussed in an episode of our fantastic podcast, Fear of a Black Dragon. And it's been a really fun thing to use.
Awfully named, but fantastic podcast. Black Dragon.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, Yunsuin. Well, so that's totally within the rules. I think when I did the original call for these, I said it could be, as long as it was a role-playing game text, it doesn't flow off the tongue quite as well to say favorite role-playing game text of 2017. So, no, awesome. Yeah, Yunsuin, that's pretty great. Tell me a little bit about, you played, it was a pretty long campaign, right? Like, how many sessions would you say it was?
It was 15 sessions, I think. 15.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose I should do a quick shout out to the excellent players, which is to say Kyle and Lauren, Alex, Richie, and who am I missing off? Jackie, and I'm sure there's one more, but this is bad. Okay, sorry, whoever it may have forgotten.
Much of our Australian contingent.
Yeah, basically. Tomer, of course, that's the last one who woke up at terrible hours in the morning to play in it.
Oh, yeah, because he's on the West Coast, right?
5 a.m.
Really early. Good on you, Tomer. That just says something about the quality of your game, Tom. Well, so over 15 sessions, I guess, did you feel like you got the most out of it, or do you feel like you could keep going?
No, there's more to explore, because in fairness, it wasn't 100% just only using that one book. So a lot of the things we reviewed on the show, this was my test bed for it. So I was using other modules and scenarios thrown into it. The core mechanic was World of Dungeons. But yeah, so there's whole sections I haven't used. The Mountains of the Moon. Mostly the Yellow City didn't get much play because my setting was a bunch of scattered islands, which was essentially the kind of Lahag 100 Kingdoms area, but fractured into different little island polities. So yeah, in a way, there's 2 entire sections that I could go and mine for even more.
Awesome. Well, listeners, go check out that episode of Fear of a Black Dragon where we talk about Yunsuin. Well, at least
part 1.
It's anticipated a 2-part. Yeah, it's part 1 of Yunsuin. We anticipate doing a part 2 at some point. A bunch of people have asked about it. It will happen eventually. I don't know when, but yeah, go check that out and to learn more about that game. I agree. I love Yunsuin. I know a lot of people pick it up and they see that it doesn't have much art. They see that it's in many ways it's kind of sparse, it has it doesn't spend tons of time on description and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. It's a lot of tables and things, and so I know a lot of people when they first pick up Yunsuin, they don't quite, they're like, this is not my thing. I'm not sure there's much here, but I'm with you. When I pick it up, it feels evocative. It feels like just enough. I think we talked about this on the show. It doesn't put its thumb on the scale too much. It gives me as the GM just enough to where I can grab the things that interest me and turn it into something, really cool.
Yeah. I think if you've got a copy you're looking at and you're not sure if you want to try and use it, go to one of those how to use this bit of the book sections where it tells you how to roll up a little city or a community and do one just by yourself to see what comes up. And I think then you will be sold on it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Philipp Neitzel from Germany, and my favorite role-playing game of 2017 is The Dark Eye, Das Schwarze Auge. I have been a fan of this game for more than 20 years now, ever since I became a role-player, which means I get to experience more than 20 years of living history on the continent of Aventuria, the setting for The Dark Eye. I saw realms rise and fall. I saw NPCs become important figures, over time grow old, marry the whole soap opera deal. I read the Aventurian Herald, the newspaper that comes out every 2 months describing how the meta plot goes on, and played all the important adventures and campaigns. And 2017, I got to work on The Dark Eye full time. As a professional in the role-playing industry, I'm a writer, editor, and social media person for The Dark Eye now. And that's defined my year. Also, I've had some really great games of The Dark Eye online in my home group and at conventions. I get to be a guest on the Gauntlet because of it. So it is the defining game of my year. And since I'm living the dream of basically becoming a writer on my favorite show, or defining the Sixth Worlds, the Forgotten Realms of Germany, and especially for me, there can't be another choice than The Dark Eye for my favorite game of 2017.
Hey, Gauntlet, this is Chris Schorb out here in sunny Santa Barbara, California. Wanted to talk about my favorite game for 2017. I had a couple categories for favorite game. The first category is the favorite game I played. That has to be 10 Candles, run by fellow Gauntleteer Tomer. We played it at PineCon, and the atmospheric aspect of the candles, and it just getting darker and darker until the ultimate end. It was just amazing. Such an incredible game, and Tomer ran it so amazing. My favorite game to run this year, I ran a lot of D&D, and there were some really amazing games, but I also did run a Funnel World, Dungeon World version at Orcon in February, and I think that was my favorite game to run this year. Finally, special mention, favorite LARP, Glass Ceiling by Todd Nicholas and Jen Martin was my favorite LARP. I was both a facilitator and a player, and had a great time playing that at PineCon. Thanks a bunch. Have a great holiday and a Happy New Year.
Okay, we are back. It is time for me to reveal my favorite game of 2017. We've done this. This is the third year now we've done this. And in the two previous favorite games, I had a hard time picking my favorite game. I had it down to like 2 or 3, and it was a real like, oh my God, what should I do? Trying to weigh the various options and stuff. This year it was dead easy. Very, very easy selection this year. Monster Hearts 2 is my favorite game of 2017.
Wow.
There's no other game came close for me. Quite simply, I ran 16 sessions this year of Monster Hearts 2, and each was just so good. I mean, this is just the game I had the most fun with this year, and that's how I've made my decision, basically. I do think that I'll say that I was pretty skeptical of the need for a Monster Hearts 2 because I had been playing and enjoying Monster Hearts 1 for so long. After Dungeon World and its various, derivatives, Monster Hearts is the game that I run the most, right? Like I play Monster Hearts a lot. So to me, it was like, well, I already love this game, and I think this game is really good already. Why do we even need a Monster Hearts 2? But I have to say, once I got it in my hands, once I got a chance to run it through some sessions, I think the changes that were made to Monster Hearts 2, by and large, are so great. They just make a great game even better. The changes help the game lead to more satisfying and consistent outcomes. A few little bullet points here. I think strings get used more often in Monster Hearts 2 than they do in Monster Hearts 1. I think putting the strings move as a move in the moves list is a big part of that. I think taking out the manipulate NPC move and just having that be a strings implication is a big part of that. That alone is a great change. The game does not feel like so much of a sort of like Oprah Winfrey passing out conditions to everyone kind of thing, right? Like, and you get a condition, and you get a condition, and you get a condition. It doesn't feel like that. Conditions feel more, they feel more impactful. They feel more important when they happen. I think the basic moves are better written. For example, on Turn Someone On, I think the 10+ result is significantly more interesting on 10+. I think Keep Your Cool is written in a way that it actually feels more, it just feels more visceral and like more tough. Like you have to like actually make some tough decisions, and it leads to good table conversation. Lash Out Physically no longer has the triggering of another move baked into it, which I think is a great improvement. Just across the board, the moves just feel better. They work better. I think the playbooks are more focused. As an example, this is a small example, but I think it's really representative of the focusing and the tightening of Monster Hearts 2. The ghoul in Monster Hearts 1, when he went into Darkest Self, or she went into Darkest Self, the ghoul's Darkest Self was, you just get hungrier. You just want to satisfy your hunger more. You're just more hungry, right? The new one, you are specifically hungry for flesh. You want flesh and bone and meat and blood, right? And that little distinction, having played the ghoul for a few sessions, that little distinction makes that feel so much better. It feels like it feels like more visceral. It feels like more intense. It's easier to role play, right? Like I'm not just wildly hungry for my, hunger for drama or whatever the hungers were. I'm hungry for meat, right? I am a zombie now, right? It's reflective of a game that I think just knows much more what it wants to be. Little things. renaming GM moves to GM reactions. That's a very, very tiny thing, but I think it shows a really keen understanding of how people play Monster Hearts and like how people even play Powered by the Apocalypse games. I know that Avery she did that big survey, right, where she asked people to like give her like lots and lots of feedback on like Monster Hearts and like how certain things work at the table. And you can tell she took all that to heart and really, really used it to make like to me, it's just a really, really optimum experience. I won't dive into the Chosen debate right now. I see Kate raising her fists in anger. I think tossing the Chosen was a great idea. But, people will disagree with that. Just, to me, this is what I think a 2E should look like. I think a 2E should not lose sight of what made the game great and just really rev up and tweak and perfect the things that help it be like the game it really wants to be. And that's what's happened here. I don't know what else to say about it, except it just feels the game is just a complete triumph. Like every session was so good. The game was never ever in my way, right? Like it was always giving me the things I needed to make sure the story was going great. So Monster Hearts 2 is my favorite game of 2017.
Good choice.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I came into those sessions. I wanted to play the trifecta of Apocalypse World games that I hadn't yet played, which was Monster Hearts, Dungeon World, and Apocalypse World this year. And I came into Monster Hearts incredibly skeptical.
I know, I remember.
Because I'm an old white dude who's kind of uptight. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to kind of sit here and do stuff. Oh my God, that character. Just, holy cow. I mean, that whole thing, but that character is one of my all-time favorite characters now.
Your Ghost Ellen was, I was like, after every session, I was, first of all, it was a ghost. And to me, in the past, the ghost had been one of the more unsatisfying playbooks, right? One of the more unsatisfying skins. But, that's a combination of, I think that like the system is working a little better now to support the ghost a little better, but also, you were also just playing it really, really well, Lowell. But you're right. I mean, like, I think you can say that about all these characters. I mean, I often have this like sort of, like I run games, I run lots of games, and the characters, they all kind of blend together in my head. Like I don't, like I don't remember them, or, the stories just get a little fuzzy, and I couldn't tell you like who was playing which such and such fighter or such and such whatever, But man, not in my sessions of Monster Hearts 2 this year. I mean, they're sharp, distinct characters. And the whole way through, the system was supporting us. I mean, the whole way through, it was giving us like everything we needed. And I just don't think it gets any better than that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think your comments are interesting, Will, because I've seen Monster Hearts specifically used by what we consider more traditional gamers as, oh, this is something for the women folk. And I think it really undersells Avery's design and her design direction is so thoughtful and so concerned with the fine details. Just the survey and the fact that when the results came back from the survey, her understanding and exploration that the game was not being played in the ways that she had expected it to be played, and having to look at her design process and say, how do I facilitate what the community wants to do with my game, and how do I make it better? As someone who, I wrote her a long rant of the issues I had encountered playing the game and said, how would you as a designer change these things?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, it is a sort of a meta thing, I guess, but like it definitely, how many game designers do that, right? How many game designers like actually receive that kind of like criticism and that kind of input for their creative project and say, I'm going to change my thinking. Maybe I wasn't right about this all along. I think it's really special, I mean, I think it's really special. I don't think you see it very often.
It's especially telling in the fact that right now there are a couple of Kickstarters for second editions of games that are out there that I was super excited about, but now I've watched the design documents roll by and I'm like, that's not the game I play. That's not the game I think anybody plays. What are you doing? And canceling my pledges. But man, I was so good. And I made my wife listen to some of the sessions and watch her eyes go, and so it was great.
Yeah, I'm really glad we all had a great time with it. Well, that's my pick.
I'm Michael Matthews, and for my pick of the 2017 favorite role-playing game, definitely comes down to Wield. In Wield, you play a super powerful magical item, and you also play the wielder of another player's magical item. What I love about this is you have a massive epic scope where in a single session, sometimes 5 minutes into the very first one, I have seen kingdoms overturned, cities turned to dust. I have seen armies killed and then raised from the dead. It also has this possibility of the highly personal. Because they're playing these rather disposable wielders from a bunch of different places, each of the wielders a character plays could have a much, much smaller scope that they're dealing with outside of the larger plans of the item, which are called Vacha in Wield. Also, the morality of the Vacha is a little different than that of a regular person. Because they are so long-lived, humanity is essentially something that they can ignore to a degree. If thousands of people die because they're doing this thing, it doesn't matter so much to the Vacha, but it might matter very much to one of the Vacha's wielders. And the best thing about it, on top of all of this, it plays incredibly quickly. The system is super simple, and it concentrates on the story and doesn't get you bogged down in looking up the rulebook, except to see what powers you might grant the wielder and what that might cost you. Because if a wielder gets too many powers from you, they start to gain knowledge of how you can be destroyed and control over you. So, for me, Wield, best role-playing game of 2017.
My name is Jesse Edmond, and my favorite game of 2017 is Chris Sneezak's Odvex Castle, played in Dungeon World. It was a blast. It was at Queen City Conquest here in Buffalo, New York, and I sat down at a table with 3 players that I didn't know, and we just had a blast. And he built this amazing dungeon that had so many weird traps and twists and crazy stuff, and it felt like a real story. We played 3 sessions, and it felt like we completed the story. My character was named for a little-known British science fiction series then I misspelled it. But nobody got that, so I didn't get made fun of for that. But Rob Bush played in it, Rob Abrazato. Great table, great time. And Odvex Castle will be returning in some way, I guess. So I'm really excited to have kind of play-tested that. Thanks for listening, Gauntleters, Gauntleticians, people of Gauntlet. Bye.
My name is Opistry Richard, and my favourite game of 2017 is Cthulhu Dark. This is an exceptional game for reasons that go beyond what's written in the rulebook. This is a one-sheet game the designer put online for free 7 years ago, that this year had a Kickstarter that raised nearly $100,000, and even though it was only run by the designer, was praised as being better run than Kickstarters run by dedicated professionals. The designer promoted a diverse group of collaborators to produce original settings within the book, and so it provides an amazing example of what a white, cis, straight, male RPG designer can do to promote diversity if that's what they wish to do. The game itself is investigative horror that just throws out everything that is in the way between the player and the character and what their character is experiencing, but it keeps in just enough to retain the mythos atmosphere. You don't have an inventory or a skills sheet to hide behind when you play Cthulhu Dark. All you have is a single die, and all it tells you is how close your character is to glimpsing the infinite and having their mind shatter. That's why Cthulhu Dark is my pick for 2017.
Hi, this is Paul. Before I tell you about my favorite game of the year, I want to read some responses from folks that didn't have the opportunity to record their own pieces, which I asked for on Google+. For Ellen Saxon, it has to be Dungeon World. She explains, "Other games have hit me harder, but this is the game that opened up the world of RPG to me and showed me games aren't just their mechanics, but their players." For David Rothvetter, the game of 10 Candles he and I shared at Camp Nerdly was in his top 3 sessions of the year. He says, "Being in the woods with the candles going out and us becoming more and more desperate, I loved it." Robert Nolan's pick for 2017 is Serial Homicide Unit by Kat Miller of Incarnadine Press. His explanation, "The game is so easy you can learn it as you play. yet the mechanics and framing are so powerful you can't help but get emotionally invested. Plus, you get an audio version of the rules, making the game much more accessible. David J. wants you to know his favorite game was Masks. He says, I got together a bunch of superhero nerds that had never played an RPG and a few friends I hadn't gamed with since high school D&D, and also the regular PBTA guy, and played a whole 6-month arc. There were crushes, coming out discussions, lots of parent drama, and even saving the world once or twice. Great game, and one of my favorite campaign runs ever. Christo Meade says it was Liberté at GauntletCon. In his words, the dark setting of a world of rain where the children we play have holed up from the siren monsters that hunt them in a bizarre temple. The game really pushes you as a player, encouraging intense, emotional play, perhaps because you are already playing such vulnerable characters. Mark Causey wants to cheat just a little. He says, it's not an RPG per se, but a gameplay format. I started a play-by-post game on Tavern Keeper, and the gameplay and role-playing have been so damn good. Also, it's really been showing me a whole other way to role-play. I just think differently, and it's blown my mind. Marshall Miller says, the most fun I had playing a game this year was Monster Hearts at PAX East Games on Demand. The nicest game I received has to be Bluebeard's Bride. I mean, wow. And the upcoming game I'm most looking forward to is Rosenstrasse. Jason Lutz says, Blades in the Dark for me. A web of narrative possibilities is sketched out during character and crew creation. The setting is defined just enough to create a particular vibe while leaving specifics open to interpretation, and things build out naturally from there, session to session. It's like a great streaming series that you play with your friends. This week I even felt moved to describe our opening credit sequence while Furnace Room Lullaby played in the background. As for me, that game of 10 Candles Dave Rothfeder mentioned was certainly one of the most intense GMing experiences of my life, but I'm giving the honor to an oldie but goodie that I got to run for the first time this year, Inspectors. The framework it provides for structuring and pacing improvisational play, the simple way in which it allows the GM to be lazy, the way in which it gives players the say in what the mystery actually is, it is delicious, and I look forward to more.
All right, well, that is our favorite games of 2017. Folks, thanks so much for joining me, and thanks so much for your help on the podcast this year.
Oh, thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks for bringing me on this year.
Yeah. Where can we find each of you? I don't normally ask this, so I'll just... Rich, where can we find you?
You can find me on Plus One Forward, this podcast powered by the Apocalypse. You can also find me on my YouTube channel. Just look for Orc Lord. I put a lot of my APs up there. And, I'm on the Google Plus and the Twitters, so you can find me. There are lots of easy ways.
Rach, where can we find you?
You can find me on social media. I'm over on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter as TedDog at TEDDOG. I'm occasionally on G+, but most of my day I am only on my cell phone, and their app is not great. You can also find me as a co-host of Plus One Forward.
Awesome. Kate, where can we find you?
Bluestockings.ca. Super easy.
And Lowell, where can we find you?
I blog at Age of Ravens, and I also have, as Rich does, I have many of our Gauntlet Hangouts games recorded and on my YouTube channel.
Awesome. And you guys know where to find me. I'm on G+. So, listeners, that's our show. If you want to get in touch with us, sort of more cosmically, generally, we can be found on G+. Just go to the community section of G+, and search for the Gauntlet. We have a Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. We have a website. It's gauntlet-rpg.com, a newly sorted website. The website is much cleaner and easier to use now, so go check it out.
I'm a fan. I like it. It's very pretty. You did a good job there, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's super easy to use. Like, you go there and bam, you know what the Gauntlet is right away. That's gauntlet-rpg.com. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks again, everybody. And listeners, thanks for listening.
Happy New Year.